Right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to have you all here today for our seminar or webinar, Cyber Skills Gap Imperative for National Security. I'm absolutely delighted to be the chair of this particular event. We have a fantastic group of speakers, so I thank you already in advance for agreeing to speak here with us today. Let me just perhaps run through the programs so that you have an idea of who's speaking and who the speakers are. And once I'm done with that, I will hand over to our first speaker. So our first speaker will be Dr. Tombari Sibe. He is a distinguished digital forensics and cybersecurity expert with over 2 decades of professional experience. He's the CEO and lead forensic examiner of Digital Footprints Nigeria Limited, where he has led numerous complex digital forensic investigations and high-impact cybersecurity projects for national and international institutions. He also serves as a visiting research fellow at the University of South Wales and also as a professor of practice in cybersecurity at Maiva Open University. He lectures at River State University and is also an official member of the Forbes Technology Council, as well as a fellow of the Nigerian Society of Engineers. He holds a PhD in information technology and an MSc in digital forensics from the University of Cumberland, and also a Master's of Engineering in Electronic Telecommunications Engineering from the University of Port Harcourt. Amongst all of those things, I could mention many more, but just that much so far, because then I want to also introduce our second speaker. Our second speaker is Dr. Maurice Dawson, and he's an accomplished scholar, educator, and global cybersecurity leader whose work spans artificial intelligence, cyber defense, and digital forensics. He serves also as an associate professor in the Department of Information Technology and Management at the Illinois Institute of Technology, where he also directs the Center for Cybersecurity and Forensics Education. He's recognized internationally for his expertise, and he has been awarded multiple grants, Fulbright Scholar grants, in order to advance AI curriculum development and cybersecurity capacity. His research integrates artificial intelligence, critical infrastructure protection, and ethical cybersecurity governance, with a particular focus on applying technology to national resilience. He has published very extensively in various publishing outlets. And in addition to his academic leadership, he's also a sought-after consultant and policy advisor for government's industry, offering his expertise in cybersecurity policy, AI adoption strategies, and risk management frameworks. And then our final speaker then is Dr. Ron Martin. Dr. Ron Martin is a professor of practice at Capital Technology University. He's specializing in the functional area of critical infrastructure, industrial control system security, identity, credentials, and access management. He also maintains professional relationships with a diverse mix of businesses and serves on the board of directors of many profit and non-profit organizations such as the International Foundation for Protection Officers, IFPO, and the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineering. He is also a voting member of the US Technical Advisory Group to the International Standards Organization, which works to develop and articulate the US position by ensuring public and private sector stakeholder involvement. He retired from the US Army in 1999, but he worked in many important positions as military controller, provost marshal, security manager, and doctrine literature writer and instructor. He has a long career of service. So without further ado, now I thank all the 4 speakers for coming to our webinar. We're absolutely excited and delighted to have you all here. And without further ado, I hand over to the first speaker, Tom Barry. The floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kristen. Always good to participate in this webinar. It's been an annual ritual over the last 3 years. So I'd like to share my slide. Let me see.
Yeah, you should be able to.
Okay. Yeah, can you confirm you can see it at the other end?
Very good.
All right. So basically, my job is to set the stage and discuss this generally, this topic generally, try and touch on a few areas as well as common to all, as well as zero in a bit, just slightly a bit to where I'm doing this from in Africa and in Nigeria. So the topic is cyber skills gap, imperative for national security. So across every sector, whether it be government, financial services, or energy, telecoms, and even defense, the digital ecosystem forms the backbone of the modern society. Yet this ecosystem that is now the backbone of the modern society also remains, dangerously fragile, basically because of the fact that the global cybersecurity workforce is not growing at the rate, required to secure it. And that is not something anybody should be happy about because it has real national security implication. Now, without adequate talent, countries remain reactive, vulnerable, and dependent on foreign capabilities. And that's also very common in developing economies, and this creates a strategic disadvantage. Like I mentioned, this obviously has, a national security implication because this gap directly undermines national security, leaving very critical infrastructure vulnerable and limiting incident response capabilities across government, defense, essential services, both in the private sector and in the public sector. So we go straight and look at the global cybersecurity workforce estimate, and it's a beautiful report that has been done over the last few years consistently on an annual basis by ISC Square, which looks at the workforce estimate as well as the workforce gap. So globally, the workforce is estimated at, that's workforce for cybersecurity, is estimated at about 5.5 million personnel. And if you look at the continental distribution of it, you can see, North America is the highest with about 1.5 million. And the least is Africa and the Middle East, not just Africa, but Africa and the Middle East, which is just about 431,000, number of cybersecurity personnel across that region, Africa and the Middle East. Now, if you flip the other side and look at the actual workforce gap, this ISC Square report also estimates that there is about 4.8 million, workforce gap in cybersecurity. Again, if you look at in the continental distribution of that, North America is in short supply of about 542,000, and Africa, yet again, is about 124,000 in terms of cyber skills. So this is something that should be quite disturbing because if you look at the dynamics of the development across, the nation, even let's look at, say, Nigeria, where you have even a tele-density of over 100%, meaning that more phones than humans or more phone lines than humans in Nigeria, and also a very high rate of digitalization across different sectors. Yet we see that the numbers of personnel that will man this critical area is not commensurate. So this is something that obviously has a national implication. If you want to go down and look at a few other stats in terms of global security crisis, cybersecurity crisis, about a report shows that about 87% of organizations report shortage in terms of cyber skills, and that the estimated cost of cybercrime by 2025, end of 2025, is about 10.5 trillion. And that's a massive blow on any economy. Also, still echoing the previous stats of 4.8 million in terms of cyber skills gap or cyber workforce gap. And another report also shows that the average company takes about 200 days plus to be able to fill their cybersecurity positions. I put that beautiful mind the gap because this is a gap every nation has to be mindful of, because the entire segment, the entire workflow, the entire public sector facilities currently is almost completely migrated to the digital space. So who will protect this? That is the question. Now, why does this gap exist? The gap exists basically, because of the rapid digitalization, there's been a lot of digital adoption across every nation over the last 10 to 20 years. Also, it's also there because there's the growing cybercrime case, cybercrime as a service, the fact that the entry barrier for cybercrime is now very low because anybody can go to the dark web and procure very dangerous tools. So cybercrime as a service has surged the number of cyber incidents, and the more the incidents, the more you are exposed when you're not properly manned. Also, technological complexities. We talk about all the big terminologies, the Internet of Things, the artificial intelligence, and all the beautiful emerging technologies. But all of these also have their own emerging cybersecurity gaps, cybersecurity risk, which means that the more you have all of this new technology, the more you'll be exposed if you do not have the capacity to man them, the capacity to tackle this emerging risk. Also, limited training pathways and the widening gap rather between the academia and the industry. And I'm going to speak a little bit more on this later. If you also look at the cyber threat landscape, it's important to just touch base on this because that is important in order for you to estimate how well you're prepared to defend them. There's a lot of ransomware operations today. A few years ago, it wasn't so much of a problem in places like in Nigeria or in Africa, but the recent statistics, if you look at the Interpol Cyber Threat Assessment Report, it shows greater, ransomware operations in Nigeria, in South Africa, in Egypt, and elsewhere in the world. It's a big problem, and that is something that is of prime consideration and prime concern to any nation. Also, nation state espionage, critical infrastructure attacks. That again, back in the days, used to be something that was not imagined. All of the attacks at critical infrastructure used to be physical in nature, but today they are largely digital. And it's happening almost on a daily basis. They're targeting OTs, they're targeting ICS, they're targeting SCADA, taking advantage of all of these emerging technologies and these OT technologies that they did not anticipate the level of attacks that is going to happen. Security was not at the center of their design back in the days. And also, there's been a lot of financial fraud, like in different reports also across the continents. Now, why this matters to national security? This matters very, very significantly because cybersecurity is not just a technical field. It is now something that is intertwined with the heartbeat of any nation, with national defense, with critical infrastructure protection, with digital economy resilience, with public trust in digital government. We see elections now being conducted with technology at the center of it. We see healthcare being driven with technology at the center of it. Very critical national services, very critical commercial services. Technology is driving all of this. So, and therefore you have to be concerned about how this is being protected. Also, law enforcement and justice systems are increasingly relying on digital evidence, digital technology, and so on and so forth. So it's something very important. And countries that are unable to produce skilled defenders will face increased breach, exposure of critical infrastructure, greater dependency on foreign donors, reduced geopolitical leverage, slower digital transformation, weak cyber threat intelligence capability, and limited response capability. A few case studies of how the cyber operations or the cyber is influencing the physical. If you look at this Russo-Ukrainian war, while the kinetics is what makes the headlines, there is a lot in terms of cyber operations, going on. A few years ago, we all witnessed the long fuel queues in America, the Colonial Pipeline, which was a ransomware attack. Also in South Africa, we had coordinated DDoS attacks, targeting critical national infrastructure. And even back home in Nigeria, there's been a lot of attacks also directed at financial services institutions and many other institutions. Now, if you zero in a bit down to Africa, Still, that beautiful report by ISC Square, this is from the 2024 report, which shows the total workforce for Nigeria to be about 25,000 skilled cybersecurity personnel. Compare that with South Africa, which is about 177. South Africa comparatively looks higher, but if we also look at the incidence of, attack and the things they are contending with, you'll see that the gap is also quite wide. Now, if you look at the actual job, skills gap, Nigeria is put at about 8,352 and South Africa about 57,000. That's because South Africa has digitized a lot of their operations, and therefore the need for cybersecurity personnel has become even more higher. There's a lot of professional density, infrastructure gaps in across Africa, brain drain, what we call the Japa syndrome in Nigeria, and then underfunded programs and very high level of foreign dependency, which is not the best in terms of national security. Now, if we zero in largely to Nigeria and interrogate the issues, we have fragmented training efforts. There are training efforts, but sometimes it's a bit fragmented, insufficient hands-on training infrastructure, lack of unified national framework, which is being addressed, which I'm aware is being addressed, brain drain, which I mentioned earlier, and then limited academia industry synergy, which I also know efforts are being made, however little, at the level of the regulators, like COREN, like NUC, in terms of the new curriculum which they have released, particularly for engineering. In terms of notable progress, the National Cybersecurity Policy and Strategy document released by ONSA has provided direction and will continue to provide direction. So NIDA has carried out some skills capacity. However, if you look at it from the population of the country, it might look quite small, but at least these are steps that is notable. Also, ONSA has done a lot of cyber governance programs supporting national security agencies, which I'm also very aware of, and sector-led skilling efforts in banking, in telecommunications, and in fintech. It's amazing the level of maturity in some of the financial institutions. It's very remarkable when you also compare them with other places. Now, let's look at a case study of how we can bridge this gap. First of all, if you look at those statistics which I shared earlier, you can clearly tell that no nation is on the safe side. There's a gap everywhere. But however, there are nations that have put in place certain efforts which others can also learn from as we all scramble to bridge this gap. For instance, the US. So I'd run through a few initiatives. The NICE Workforce Framework for Cybersecurity. NICE is the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, which is a NIST special publication 800
Hello, my
181,
brother.
which is a recognized standard developed
What
by
about you?
Also, it provides a common authoritative taxonomy for defining cybersecurity. It's a tool for guiding curriculum development, workforce planning, competency assessment, and recruitment. And it's used by federal agencies, big tech companies, defense contractors, universities, and training institutions. This is an important framework which developing economies like Nigeria and most of the others elsewhere can also learn from, because it attempts to address this, puts a blueprint which you can follow in terms of cyber skills development. It also provides a structured blueprint by building and scaling cybersecurity talent pipeline, also helping universities, training centers map courses to real job roles rather than abstract theory. And that has been one of the key problems. The fact that universities still, run with theories of 50 years ago without mapping it to the real world, vacancies, the real world demands in terms of cyber expectations, in terms of, real industry skill set. also providing governments with a model for national workforce development. Another is the National Cyber Workforce and Education Strategy with 4 pillars. Pillar one, equip every American and with foundational cyber skills through K-12 education integration. Pillar two, transform cyber education for kindergarten through higher education and vocational training. And pillar three is expand and enhance America's cyber workforce through industry partnerships and apprenticeships. And pillar four, cyber strengthen the federal cyber workforce with programs and professional development. And this has also proved very important. There are also other case studies. There is this National Centers of Academic Excellence, and there are over 365 designated institutions across the nation. And I know this is jointly done by the DoD and some other agencies. And I believe that Dr. Dawson can speak better about this when he speaks. They give a lot of research, grant scholarship, and focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion to broaden participation from underserved communities, which is also, an issue. If you look at the global cyber workforce in terms of male to female ratio, you see that it's a hugely, highly male-dominated profession, and we need to look at how to bridge that gap even from the gender point of view. Key lessons from the U.S. model: cybersecurity education treated as a critical national infrastructure requiring sustained federal investment, unified competency-based standards, ensure consistency and quality across all training programs, and deep federal industry academia collaborations, creates direct pathways from education, to employment. And I've been privileged to, sit in a few of those advisory council or advisory board meetings where industry people are asked to come and make recommendations as to how the academic structure, the program structure, the curriculum, the content, and make key advice in that regard. In the UK, there is a CyberFest program. Time will not let me go through the details, but this targets basically the young people from 14 to 25. This is the 10th anniversary, and over 350 students had passed through, having that experience and that opportunity to fuse cyber education even at a young age. And there's also the higher education ecosystem where you have about 92 NCSC certified degree programs, academic centers of excellence as well, and the cybersecurity body of knowledge, which provides comprehensive reference framework for the field. And this has also helped, a lot of this is being reviewed and transitioning into more effective model, but it's notable to mention them. Implications of inaction: vulnerable infrastructure, increased breach frequency and severity, economic damage, weakened deterrence, geopolitical vulnerability, threats to digital transformation, exposure of critical infrastructure, greater dependency on foreign vendors, weak law enforcement outcomes, slow recovery and attribution challenges, weak cyber threat intelligence capability, and limited incident response capability. So what can nations do? One, develop your national framework. Every nation is unique. Every nation has their unique challenges. While we also salute those done elsewhere, it's important that nations look at their own situation and be able to develop what works for them. Need to also standardize education and build training infrastructure, strengthen law enforcement. There are technologies that law enforcement actually catalyze them. If you look at the forensic discipline, you cannot take away the role of law enforcement in strengthening that profession across board from the onset till date. Forge public-private partnerships, academia industry collaborations, very important. Develop cyber ranges where you can have a lot of hands-on trials and trainings across the nation, incentivize cyber careers, international cooperation, develop national certification pathways, and very importantly, a whole of nation approach, not an isolated approach. It's important that we look at it holistically. So in terms of international corporations, I gave a few recommendations. I'll just pick maybe two for want of time: joint capacity building and multinational exercises which we can. If you look at the West African, sub-region in Africa, there is freedom of movement, and so you have a lot of diffusion of personnel. How well have we taken advantage of that diffusion to also ensure that there is even distribution of cyber skills talent, because anything happening in one country could potentially get to the other because of freedom of movement. So we need to look at things such as this. So in conclusion, the cyber skills gap is fundamentally a national security gap. And nations that lack cyber capabilities leave their digital and physical environments exposed. I believe in the course of this conversation, we'll be able to explore some of the strategies. We will talk and answer questions on some of the strategies which I have raised in the course of this presentation. Thank you. I would pause here, and thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That's been a fantastic talk and very, very important. So thank you so much also for the great timekeeping. And now I'll hand over to our second speaker, Dr. Maurice Dawson. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. You should be able to see my screen now. So I enjoyed really the first presenter's presentation and the mention of the United States, because what I'm going to do is really hit on some touch points that are happening here in the United States. We have a new administration, as the world knows, and that particular administration has caused a ripple effect within the cybersecurity pipeline. All right. So as cyber threats intensify and adversaries grow more sophisticated, America faces a critical workforce shortage that threatens our national security infrastructure, defense capabilities, and economic stability. So to scale the crisis, the mention of the actual open jobs is really important to think about, right? So I used a website called cyberseek.org, and with this particular site, it showed over 469,000 open cybersecurity positions right now in the country. This is public and private. The public jobs are those that are with the federal government, city, and maybe county. Many of these jobs, especially at the federal level, they require you to get a security clearance. And having to obtain a security clearance, not every U.S. citizen can even get a security clearance. You may have to undergo a polygraph, 10-year background check. Depending upon, you may have to relinquish other citizenships if you have any. Depending upon who you're married to, it can also cause a number of issues. And so this demand, and even the federal sector, is very large, right? So imagine this. So for every 100 cybersecurity job openings, there's only 68 workers available to fill them. So a huge critical shortage. So the Department of Defense, or the War Department, has a huge cybersecurity workforce challenge. There is the Department of Defense 8140 requirements. These have superseded the 8570 requirements, and this required individuals to get a certain cybersecurity certification for a job. If you were touching a machine, you had to get something like a Security Plus. If you're doing more advanced engineering type work, you had to get ISE squared certified secure software lifecycle professional. Very difficult certification to get. So for every particular job, you had to get these certifications to do or perform your job, or within 6 months. Otherwise, you were potentially let go, right? So the 8140 has mandatory certification pathways. You cannot go around this. So you also have to have your college degree. It needs to meet a STEM requirement. And then you have to have this professional certification requirement as well. There's role-based competency requirements. There's continuous education mandates. So even once you get this certification, this degree, and any other credentials, you still have to maintain continuous education requirements. There's a number of workforce requirements. I mentioned of this before, it was NICE, the National Initiative on Cybersecurity Education. So you have workforce categories, and there's 52 distinct cyber roles. There's baseline certification required for each one. And then there's performance-based assessments. And then you have the certification burden, right? So as you have these certifications required, it costs quite a bit to get certifications. Some of these certifications can be anywhere from free for a limited period of time all the way to $800 to take the test. That's pass or fail. So if you fail the exam, sometimes they'll say, hey, you can retake the test within so many months. Otherwise, you need to pay the fee as well. So now that becomes a barrier to entry. Right now, you want to get this job, you see this job that's available, but you don't really have the cost not only to pay for the certification, but also get the training. Some of these workforce camps, they're like $5,000 for 1 week, right? And so now you're like, I have to pay $5,000. I need to get the site. So you have all these financial barriers to education just to get the training you need to be qualified for a particular job. And then there's not enough institutions that are offering the training. So you have this as well. So critical infrastructure, there's 16 areas that CISA, and they're underneath the Department of Homeland Security, has listed as critical infrastructure. Some of them are energy utilities, financial services, water and wastewater, health and public health, communications, transport systems. You also have defense manufacturing. These are areas that are extremely important and critical for the U.S. to continue, right? So these sectors represent over 90% of the American economy and employ millions of workers. A successful large-scale cyber attack targeting multiple critical infrastructure sectors simultaneously could have catastrophic cascading effects on national security and economic stability. So the perfect storm, right? So government shutdown compounds this crisis. So October this year, the U.S. posts $284 billion budget deficit, highlighting severe physical constraints that impact cybersecurity funding and workforce retention programs. Then you had the shutdown. So the shutdown itself, so government shutdowns, they force furloughs of critical cybersecurity personnel, creating cybersecurity gaps. Air traffic controllers face shortages, exemplifying broader workforce challenges across sectors. Whenever the government shutdown, employees are still expected to work. The problem is a lot of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. So now you are taking someone's pay and saying, all right, well, we're going to hold the pay until the actual government, senators and legislators, they decide on a few things to release the budget. So individuals can't work. And in particular for air traffic controllers, in some areas, these particular individuals, they still have bills to pay, right? If they don't pay their rent, 1 month, 2 months, they are given eviction notices and they're pretty much put out on the street, right? So these individuals are driving like Uber. Uber's like Bolt for those that are in the UK or in Nigeria. Uber's like Bolt, right? So they're using these rideshare apps to make money to pay for their main job. So you can just imagine how this ripple effect causes issues, right? So if an individual needs to be looking at, they're looking at air traffic and they look at their particular dashboard and they're tired from working all these extra hours to pay for necessities, and they don't see like various blimps that are happening and stuff like that because maybe there's a ransomware there, something not functioning because they're just tired. This is a cause and effect, right? There is something called the CVE or CWE. This is commons, weaknesses, and exploits, commons, vulnerabilities, and exposures. And so when you're dealing with software and you're running a particular application, these have vulnerabilities. And MITRE was the organization that was responsible for ensuring that we could look up various exploits and vulnerabilities and weaknesses with code. And so this particular item was almost shut down, right? So the near shutdown of this would have eliminated the primary system that organizations worldwide rely on to identify, track, and remediate security vulnerabilities. This represents the fragility of our cybersecurity infrastructure. So not saying that we don't have anything good, but it's very fragile, right? So a few administrative decisions can cause all of this stuff to be halted or not be funded, and where we start creating these large gaps. And we're already behind. Like some individuals will think that we're ahead, but we're behind in some instances, and I'll talk a bit more about that. So why does this matter? So a shutdown of this particular magnitude would have halted new vulnerability identification and tracking. It would have disrupted coordinated disclosure process, created confusion in the security community, not just the United States, but in Europe, the UK, and ECOWAS, SADC, Asian countries. It would have created a huge particular confusion worldwide for individuals or institutions that are using the particular database. It would have left organizations unable to prioritize patch management, because when you're thinking about the patches and what does it cost, you need people, many people, to work on and understand really the exposure, right? So you need to understand exposure, and a lot of times these are researchers that are working on this, and so if they have no funding, they're not going to work on this, right? No one's going to work on this. Someone needs to maintain a database, and so this is why it's important. And then this would have allowed adversaries with intelligence advantage, right? Your adversary is always going to have the advantage because they're the ones who are actively looking at it. So there was the mention of the NSA Centers of Academic Excellence. The institution that I am a tenured professor at Illinois Institute of Technology, we are a center of academic excellence, right? So we're a CAE. Dr. Ron Martin at his institution is a CAE as well, but there's 300 CAEs in the United States. The problem is that sounds like a lot, but for a population of over 320 million, that's not enough. That's not enough at all. In the Chicago metropolitan area where I'm at, there's over 20 universities there, 20 universities and community colleges, because this covers community college and universities that offer all the way to PhD granting. All right, so the CD, this reduces scholarship for service obligations, promotes cybersecurity education, integrated with defense community needs. So the defense community says, hey, we need people to understand how to do network security. And so this community says, all right, we know what the actual federal government wants. We want students to understand how to do patch management, how to deploy intrusion detection system, intrusion prevention system, but to physically know how to do it and understand the theory behind it. So that is like the importance of the CA. They take the knowledge units and they actually translate those knowledge units into actionable things that can be done throughout the course. You have cyber operations. This focuses on offensive cybersecurity. And then you have a research designation, and this is for institutions that are doing research in cybersecurity. And when you look at, so basically the program graduates 20,000 students annually, approximately, right? But there's 470,000 open positions. So it's only a partial solution. As of recently, we had changes to immigration policy. So immigration policy threatens the university pipeline, right? So recent immigration rule changes threaten to end or severely restrict optional practical training, OPT. So a lot of individuals that will come to the United States, they'll expect, for STEM programs, you get 3 years OPT, 1 year if it's non-STEM. But this helps put people in positions that would work in these, maybe they're working in a small company, they're working in manufacturing, where it's hard or difficult to actually attract U.S. talent too, right? There's only 20,000, you said approximately 20,000 graduates yearly, but all these jobs. And so the issue is, how do you fill these other positions, right? And so international students graduating would be expected to fill those positions. Maybe they would get sponsored to get a green card, they would stay longer. And then, of course, generations, you're having more U.S. citizens, stuff like that. Also important because the average household in the United States average, I think, 2 kids, 1.5 to 2 kids per household, just due to rising costs and things like that. So when you're looking at everything in its totality, so we were talking about a reduced talent pipeline. So immigration restrictions eliminate 30 to 40% of potential cybersecurity workforce from universities. With the reduced pipeline, this also affects how universities operate. In other countries, you look at how education costs, right? You're paying for tuition, but many universities are they generate revenue off tuition. So if a university has 100 students and you say 30% are international students, you remove that, then the university loses essentially 30% of its actual revenue. And so now they have to stop funding various programs, maybe even lay off various professors or staff, and that creates an issue as well, whereas universities are no longer operating as they could at their full capacity. Increased vulnerability window, 469,000 plus unfilled positions. Adversary advantage, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea aggressively recruit cyber talent while expanding offensive capabilities against understaffed U.S. agencies. And then national security risk, critical missions compromised, military operations, intelligence gathering, critical infrastructure protection, and economic security all degraded. So quantifying the risk, 469,000 unfilled jobs, 68% worker supply ratio, 52 DoD cyber roles that are identified. There's 16 critical infrastructure sectors that need to be protected. There's 300 plus CAE designated universities, but not graduating enough students to fill the number of jobs available. And then 30 to 40% international student impact. So recommendations, protect the pipeline, right? Protect the pipeline, stabilize critical programs, expand training capacity, and then incentivize public service. I'm going to share one item real quick, and this item is just going to give you more of a viewpoint of how things are in my country. So if you look here, you'll see that there's 359,000 positions open as of today, right? Total employed workforce is around 1.3 million. In my beautiful state of Illinois, 19,419 jobs. And if I click the metro area, I'm in the Chicago metropolitan area, in my metropolitan region, 13,845 jobs open right now. If we look at other areas such as the DC, Maryland, Virginia, we call it the DMV. You'll see that there is 62,338 jobs open as of today. So you can see there's a huge need for talent. We need to really protect our talent pipeline. We have these wonderful initiatives, but it means nothing if there's no one to carry those initiatives out. And that is all I have for you today.
Right, thank you. Thank you so much. That's a fantastic presentation as well. So thank you. So we had two presentations already, and now I hand over to our last speaker, Dr. Ron Martin. The floor is yours. Thank you.
I hope everybody can see my screen okay. All right. Well, that's good. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about this. This is something that's been near and dear to me for a lot of years. And as we move along, we'll see it. Just a little bit. I know we talked about my bio, but one of the things that I'm very proud of that's not on this slide that I do. I'm a trustee of a nonprofit in Abuja, Nigeria, and for the last 10 years, it's been one of the joys of my life to work with the young people there. Also, this organization, International Association of Critical Infrastructure Protection Professionals, is a UK organization, and they have conferences all over Europe and the United States talking about critical infrastructure. Enough about that. This is the agenda. Now, what I'm going to try to do is I know that it's kind of busy. I'll stay within the time allotted, and I will cover the agenda with haste. Now, there's no mention of it, but the slides, I do have them available. I will send it to the moderator and so to make sure that you have them. And all of my slides that you will get are hyperlinked. So in other words, you click on it and you can go to the source of the particular slide or graphic. Most of my graphics are hyperlinked, except my picture. You don't want to find out more about me there. This is a little thing I got about 10 years ago. And I wanted to show this is because we all have large or small cities, metropolitan areas, and we start looking at the challenges that we have. And these are aligned with the United States 16 critical infrastructures. You know, you have transportation, airports, you have trucking, you have dams, you have roadways, stadiums, is critical infrastructure, hospitals, on and on and on. But this is a neat little thing. And if you have, when you get the slide, if you have an advanced copy of Adobe, it'll move around. I just think it was cute. It kind of tells you, gives you a little bit about the environment that we're living in. Now, when we start looking at dependencies, each one of our 16 sectors have a role to interact with the other sectors. Like for instance, it's very hard to do much of this stuff without electric power. It's very hard to do some of this stuff without having a hospital. So in other words, there's an interdependency that critical infrastructure has, and oftentimes we don't recognize that. We're still in our little stovepipe that we're trying to stay within. And you say, well, now we don't have to worry about whoever's to the left or the right of me. No, that's not the case. The case is that you have to interact with your brother or sister uh, critical infrastructure. One of the things that I would recommend is that you look up this word, mechatronics. We have a whole degree in there at Capital of mechatronics. And this is what it is. And this is a field that that you will need in order to get into this thing called robotics. Okay. This is, and I'm gonna go through this really quick because I don't really want to read the slides. I want to kind of expedite because I have some other things I want to talk about. But when you look at mechatronics, this is what it does. And this is how it kind of evolved over the years. And we have a whole degree, like I said before, undergraduate degree. It's just a mechanical and electrical engineering called mechatronics. And this is how these things work. Now, when we start looking at the skills gap, we are finding that there's more and more students that want to go into robotics. They want to go into quote unquote AI. They want to go into da 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 da. Well, mechatronics kind of touches a lot of that. And so some of the skill sets that you see here are some of the skill sets you need for the future. And when we start talking about computer controlled mechanical systems. Now, somebody's got to do a program. Think about this for a minute. Somebody's got to do a program, send it to an actuator for the arm to move back and forth. So, let your mind talk about that for a minute. So our students, our young people worldwide, needs to have an understanding of what code is needed to go into something, an action device or actuator to cause the device or the robot to move. So think about that for a minute and all of the skill sets that are surrounding that. Mechatronics talks about that. We've heard about this before. This is the nice framework, and I'm not going to get into the details of it. If you want to know more about it, there it is. You can click on it, and you can get more than you can ever. But I think it's very important for our young folks on the call. And I direct a lot of my lectures to our up and coming because it is very important that you know these skill sets. And I've got a few other things I want to tell you about that. So this is the gap. I want to try to fill this gap with smart young people. Now, I like this little diagram. This is cute. We remember back in the 80s, or let's say 70s. Now, some of you weren't born there, but anyway, in the 80s, maybe in the 90s, early 90s, all of these other little devices, these things we use all the time. We used to mail letters, go to the post, mail letters. We used to talk on the telephone. I challenge you to go to someone, and especially in the United States, to find a telephone. There's not many of them out there. We used to have something called a cassette tape. We used to have a camera. All of that is resident in this smartphone. And I think we need to look at that. And what was the industry that evolved from that was applications. Applications that go into the cell phone. That was an emerging industry. I mean, there were people making apps for everything. and they were making good money because they got good commissions and royalties from all of the smartphone operators. So that was a skill that they needed. And some of the apps are good, some of them are not so good. So I just want to kind of let you know. So this little thing here and all these other guys saying you took our jobs. So the next thing is what is the selection criteria for you young folks on the call and for those who train the young folks? And because that's our future. If we don't reach back and touch our young folks, you might as well give it all up. Because we're in the geriatric brigade or the old folks thing, but our young folks is going to tell us or going to show us, is going to do for us in the future. So how did they figure that out? I created this about 5, 6 years ago, and I'll go through this really quick. This is a whole hour lecture just on this. The companies or employers give us position requirements. I want to hire a person, and here are the position description. Doesn't matter whether it's in the United States or in any other country. There's going to be a position. There ain't no sense of you going to college or doing anything if there's nowhere for you to get employed or to do what your talents you were trained for. So the companies are required to put out those requirements. Academia, aha. Many of your academic institutions will go to the employers and says, okay, what do I need to train? What do I need to educate? And so we're going through something right now in our advisory boards to say, okay, what is the industry telling us we need to train? And so then we develop our curriculum. Now, the last portion there, that's more important. That's the most important piece of this. It's the people, it's the student. Their role is to learn from academia and hopefully to satisfy the requirement. So if you see on the left of the slide, it says to satisfy, and and on the right is to meet or satisfy. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, to specify on the left and to satisfy on the right. So you have to learn, you have to be educated, and you have to be educated to the future. What we have at Capital for our undergrad is we have a commit program really quick, is that if you don't have a position making 60,000 this year, within the first 90 days, we'll give you 36 credit hours of additional education at no cost. We don't know any other universities doing that. And I say that to say this. We're confident in what we're teaching and what we're training our students. We have a high 90% placement rate. Enough of that. The other thing is that I teach, which is another 1 hour lecture, is that students need to know competencies of their career field. This is a model out of the U.S. Department of Labor, and I've used this across the world, India, Nigeria, Cameroon. When I'm talking with students, I'm saying, look, you need to know what are the foundational competencies. I'm not going to go into all of it, but one of the foundational competencies is like integrity. That's at the bottom. I think that's important. If you tell me you're going to do something, I got to believe you. So then the other one is accountability and responsiveness. If you say it's 9 o'clock, that's when I expect you to see it. We had a saying in the Army, if you show up on time, you're late. So, it's the thing is that I try to instruct our young folks to get there 3 minutes early to check the tech because there's always going to be a problem. So I always tell them to get there about 3 minutes early to make sure that they're ready for the instruction. And sometimes I know in one group out of one country, I said if you're not there at a certain time, you won't be able to get in. And they didn't believe me. So a whole bunch of them says, well, no, I can't. No, I don't want to hear it. I've told you 2 weeks ago what time it was going to be. I gave you reminders. Be there. So that's a foundational tenet that if you go into the workforce and they can't rely on you to be on time, then that's going to be a problem. So I teach or I instruct young people to use, and there's other competencies, lifelong learning and all kinds of things like that. So this competency model, once you hit it, as you can see here, it doesn't matter which one you're talking about. There's this scientific is where you find the enterprise security model and things of that nature. So just click on it and it will take you to those competencies that one can use in the employment. One of the last things is the occupational outlook handbook. And they said, well, this is all from the US. No, it's very generic in nature. Now, except for the salary, because I realize we have an international audience here, except for the salary, the basically requirements of this career field is articulated. Each one of these is a little short video that shows, what it takes to be these types of positions. It doesn't matter, and I've done this, and I've exposed this to many students, so I know that one of the professors may want to use this in some of the classes they are, so that's why I want to make sure they get a copy of this, and you can use this not as to try this is the right way of doing it, but I want you to be able to explain, and I'm explaining to everyone here the kinds of things that we need to do. This is another thing. I'm not going to go into all of this, but this is how many of your employers here in the United States will use this to come up with those requirements for positions. Okay, now, what are the gaps? There are many gaps that we have in our cyber existence. I only picked out 5. I could probably pick out 20. Okay, but this is just the 5 that you see here. The first one I say is industrial control systems and the operational technology. That is beginning to become more in vogue than anything else I've seen. It used to be about 10 years ago, the OT or the industrial control system people wouldn't talk to the information technology people. They said, I don't want to get with you guys. But now that's not the case. If you go to this special publication, it will tell you all about it. But that's a gap. We have a course, and the reason why I'm saying that about capital, because this is how we evolved. We have a course in industrial control systems slash operational technology, because we know that that's the emerging trend that needs to be filled. The next one is cyber physical incident response and forensics. It's a very important piece that we need to know if you have an incident, how do you respond? Well, there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes before that. But in order to do that, again, here's another link. You can see that framework of what needs to be taught in order to take care of this gap of knowledge. The next one is architecture, network segmentation, and zero trust. One of the things that I'm doing, I am leading a group of professionals for IEEE, is the development of a zero trust standard. And with that standard, it's never trust, always verify. I'm not going to get into all of what it is, but if you was to click on those links there, it can tell you everything you need to know about zero trust network segmentation, because I realize we got folks that are very experienced to those that are just beginning this process. But when you start looking at it, you see what's missing, and you see why it matters. It's stuff that as you're coming up, academia, you need to look at how are we training this stuff. Students, you got to look at how are you learning this stuff. Now, we do this. I've got some students, I got 11 students that are in our high school before college. They're in their senior year, and I'm taking them through a bunch of these things in the state of Maryland. Identity, this is an open chest wound. Identity and privileged access management. Everybody, especially if they're the boss, they said, I need to have access to everything. You don't need access to everything. So this is a whole process. And I was fortunate enough back in 2005 to help write this architecture. And this is a very, very important architecture that everyone should take a look at uh, as they're moving forward in learning it. We have a whole course that talks about identity, credentialing, and access management. It's a very important concept. And I think that's a big gap because nobody ever says, oh, that's HR's job or human resources or the people that hire. They're supposed to do the identity proofing. And no, they don't know. So everybody's got to be involved in that. Then is the big kahuna. This is the big thing is to how do you perform governance? And this is from the senior levels. They says, well, okay, how do I look at this to make sure we're doing the right thing? Well, they have a whole framework for that. They have a risk management framework. They also have the cybersecurity framework. There's all kinds of other stuff, and this is really an abbreviation to look at that. So when you put them all together, these are the five things that I feel that one would need to look at as we look at these skill gaps. Now, what's next? We saw that first slide where everybody's looking at this smartphone. So now we've got something else on the horizon. Now, how are we going to deal with AI? Right now, we've got AI talking to AI, students talking to AI, AI talking to students. Academia is being challenged as say, did that person write that? There's tools out there to figure that out, and we have processes to figure that out, whether the student has the integrity to say, here's my work, I wrote it, and I have referenced everything I got stuff from, but then they forgot to put the AI stuff that they went to this AI bot and they got the answer. And I catch them all the time. It's an integrity violation. Remember the thing I was telling you about the competency areas and integrity? It starts in school. It starts in the home. Tell me what you know. Show me how you got it. Those types of things. So with that, I really appreciate the time. I appreciate the opportunity to come here. And with that, I'll give the rest of my time to the moderators so that y'all can do what you need to do. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I thank all of the speakers for their presentations. It's been wonderful. It's been really, really a learning experience for me. And I think with that, I'm quite happy to start opening the floor to any questions that we might have. I think we have a lively audience from what I can see here in terms of the chat function. So maybe we can harness some of that and get some interesting questions going. Who wants to ask us? If you want to ask your question directly, perhaps switch on your camera and then we can hear you then asking the question. Who wants to start us off with a question? Is anybody in the audience? We have a very good audience here. I'm pretty sure there should be somebody who might be interested to ask a question. Who wants to start us with the first thing? Anybody who wants to start perhaps?
Well, I'll kind of
Please, yes, please,
yeah,
please.
I'll start off with something and it'll be interesting because as I travel from an international standpoint, and I know that in the past, many countries, many institutions have been looking towards the United States, and I've been finding other countries and other educational institutions that have been putting the cybersecurity thought out there. To the two presenters, maybe if y'all can articulate in your travels outside the United States, what are you finding in terms of how they're approaching the cybersecurity skills gap? You know, I'm picking on you, Robinson. Okay.
All right, thanks, Ron. And that's a very important question. As a matter of fact, it's something that was in my mind. I was going to ask if nobody asked, and that's because cyber. Let's bring it down to cybercrime itself. Cybercrime is a cross-border crime, and which means that multiple jurisdictions can be affected per incidence. And so you see a situation where the capability of one nation is not enough in investigating. You rely on the other nation. And so when you have this uneven skill set, an uneven skills gap across different jurisdictions, it greatly undermines even the ability to respect treaties which they signed, because some of the treaties and conventions also is a little bit blind on the fact that different nations have different skill set and different skills gap. And so the treaties and the conventions did not anticipate that they would have those widening skills gap and uneven skill set in fulfilling their particularly operational and tactical roles. So that is a very fantastic question. Now, in the course of my travels, it's been the United States clearly has been, a clear leader in terms of articulating that, yes, it is not enough, because if you look at the level of digital adoption in the United States, everything is digital, which means that you need perhaps 10 times more skill set than the nation that is just emerging from a digital adoption point of view. But at least there is an attempt at a whole of nation approach, an attempt to, build this, an attempt to address this collectively and not in silos. In most of the developing economies, I have seen fragmented programs. I have seen fragmented efforts. I've seen one institution try something out, another institution try a few trainings with 10 persons. I mean, 10 persons in a nation of over 100 million, of over 200 million is just a little drop, and it's not enough. And you know that the emerging landscape is such that, the thing you learned, the rapidly evolving landscape is such that thing you learned 2 months ago is going to be challenged today. So you need continuous learning. So I see a lot of that silos approach, and that is not helping. And that is largely among the developing nations. The developed world, yes, they have concerted efforts. They have, attempts at whole of, government, whole of nation approach. But again, if you look at things such as crimeware as a service, ransomware as a service, and the other service models in terms of from the underworld, it greatly threatens, it outpaces even their whole of government approach. So every nation has their challenge, but clearly the United States, the UK, in Asia rather, South Korea, they have done very well.
I would like to add on to that, what Dr. Sibe has said. So I'll talk about in the recent funded country visits. In Tunisia, they have a number of issues, but their biggest problem is talent. You have a lot of the younger people that I would talk to, they stated that, when they're done with the degree, they're going to France, maybe the United States, but a lot will immigrate over to France. So education in Tunisia is rather inexpensive, free in most cases. And so they get this education and they leave immediately for France, meaning that those particular jobs that are available and need to be filled, they're not being filled. One, because they don't have the talent. Two, they can't attract individuals because of the actual salaries associated. I was in Botswana, and Botswana was an interesting country in the SADC region, the South African Development Community. It's right above South Africa, SA, and it's surrounded by all these other countries. And so a lot of the things they get is actually from South Africa. And so Botswana is a very trusting country, right? They didn't have many like physical crime issues, anything like that. But a lot of people had this trusting mentality, which you will not see probably in like Senegal, Nigeria, Ethiopia. And so that particular trusting mentality opens them up to vulnerability a lot. So a lot of news you would get, maybe you get a WhatsApp message or you get a Facebook message saying that this particular item is going on, and individuals will take it as face value just because they are very trusting, right? Even transactions, People will even say, hey, or here's my bank account information, just log in and move the money over there, right? So it's a very different mentality because they have not experienced those levels of cybercrime and stuff like that. You look at a country like Kosovo, they're part of Europe, but they're not in the European Union. They also have a number of issues. They're in the Balkan region. They have issues with Serbia. They have something called COCERT, and that is basically for computer incident response team for the country. It's maybe a handful of people for the entire country. The entire country is probably like 1.2 million people, not heavily populated, but not enough people to actually really cybersecurity incident response for the country. Nowhere near. And they too have an immigration issue as well. Countries like Fiji, I was in Fiji last year with USAID doing cybersecurity artificial intelligence. They have an immigration issue as well. Australia and Fiji, they created a visa program. And so nearly half the country left Fiji to go to Australia and Australia, New Zealand, because one, the cost of commodities in Fiji is expensive and these salaries are low, right? And then their biggest issue there in terms of cybersecurity is disinformation and misinformation, right? So they're getting information or putting tribes or ethnic groups against each other. They're saying, hey, this particular individual is attacked. And so they're prompting violence through false information. And that's going on in a lot of countries. But in particular, the Fiji, the news media in Fiji was very concerned about that. And then they're also concerned about how does cyber issues work for youth that are online, you know, child predators and things like that, things that could damage the youth. And so they had a really holistic worry from, you know, younger age children all the way to adults in terms of their youth. They want to use AI. They have more cyber protections, but really what is the cause on society? So every country has different things that they are associated with and that they're worried about and they're prioritized. And so it's important. So not every particular country is not saying, hey, we need to worry about workforce. Some are saying, hey, we have an issue with extremism. We need to figure out how to deal with extremism. So what are we going to do about that? It's just priorities of the various governments. That's all I have.
Great. I see one raised hand there. There is Sixtus. Maybe you can switch on your camera and ask your question. Can you hear us, Sixtus? Let me see. Maybe he's not quite there. Ah, there's something happening. Excellent. Good. Please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, guys. I've been following the discussion from the beginning. It's an honor. What attracted me to this particular session was I'm a young cybersecurity professional, still in entry-level stage, and an electrical engineer. And this particular topic, securing the future potential in the cybersecurity space. They cited some incidents with the recent changes on Cloudflare, AWS, and other big tech giants. That there is a still gap in the cybersecurity industry. So I was supposed to talk about cybersecurity industry and how this skill gap can be mitigated. Immediately I saw this post by Dr. Tom Barry. I jumped on it because it's really interesting and it's kind of part of what I should be talking about very soon. So there's this question I wanted to ask because one of my research and going through the how do we actually reduce the monopoly, the cybersecurity space? What I mean by monopoly in the cybersecurity space, I mean like the entire arsenal, the entire cybersecurity space is designed in such a way that there are just very few people that are in charge of our cyber defense. So how do we break this monopoly? How do we break away from very few companies or very few cloud service providers or other people involved in the cloud space that are taking care of what we have, so that these redundancies and this single point of failure can be reduced, or incidents like cloud breaches can be reduced, so that companies, nations, and individuals can keep up the businesses running, keep up their nations running. So that's my question. First question I have. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I don't know, Tom Barry, do you want to answer that? And then I see afterwards there's Maurice who wants to ask a question as well.
The answer, I was raising my hand to answer.
Oh, to answer. Okay, so no, sorry. Maybe you want to go first, given that you raised your hand first. Maybe you want to go first and to answer the question.
Yeah, so of course, that's a great question. So, when you think about these single point of failures with these large organizations, you got to remember. So people are saying that, hey, there's only so many providers that can fix this, right? So if you are under the impression that there's only so many providers, you will go to that provider. For example, like a lot of people use Windows or Mac, not really realizing that, hey, I could use a Linux-based system. It's open source, which means it's 100% free, maybe some subscription for like patches and stuff, but for the most part, it's relatively low cost. People won't do that because people aren't aware of that. So let's say you have an idea of like, I know how to create a enterprise-based solution, low cost. I believe you're in Nigeria, so you say maybe you're in Lagos or Abuja or Port Harcourt, right? Don't know where exactly you are, and you're like, okay, I have something that I can use here as a Lagosian, right? And so what you do is you start saying, hey, I have these skills, I have this, I have a proven solution, and you start marketing that. And so you would have to get people to be confident in what you're doing and then sway individuals away from it because there's lots of opportunity, right? There's lots of opportunity. People just need to understand that you can do the job or whatever entity you're working for and push them or pull them away. And that becomes one of the biggest issues. How do I guess your question is more like how do small, mid-sized businesses get entry into cybersecurity, into like consulting, service, and stuff like that. That is going to be market to market. But again, a lot of the people they're looking for proven solutions and they're looking at to minimize the risk for deploying their systems. So as soon as you have a solution that you can do that and is at a lower cost, especially the time now where prices are surging around the world, this could be your opportunity to do that. And so you would have to sell that solution, provide a proof of concept, maybe let them use it for a little bit just so they can see, oh, wow, we've have 30 less vulnerabilities that are showing up at the end of the month. We want a Coral solution. And so you have to think about your barrier to entry and how do you enter and deploy whatever solution that you have available.
Great.
I'd like to add on to that.
Please.
One of the things that I didn't mention and we didn't mention that 85% of critical infrastructure is in non-governmental or non-federal possession. Okay, just think about that for a minute. However, the government has to provide the structure for compliance, and it's going to be voluntary. And what's happening here in the States is that many of our insurance companies are saying that to these private entities that you must adhere to what the government says, else we won't insure you. That has been over the last 5 years something that's really caused. Now, to answer your question, governance is you got to see what's happening on the national stage. What is Nigeria doing? Do you know, for example, the 13 critical infrastructure sectors that are in Nigeria today? Do you know the companies that are associated with that? Have you asked them what are their requirements? And then go back to your educational facility or find a way of looking at satisfying the requirements that the employers want. Now, I'm not trying to get into the political aspects or as who you know and all this kind of stuff, but if you want to get your expertise up, I think is something that you have to begin the process of getting smart on what is in your country and what is your country doing to to expose their critical infrastructure and other infrastructures around. So I hope that kind of answers a little bit more your question. Where are
Yeah.
you from, Okoro?
Yeah, I'm from Nigeria. You guessed
I
right.
know
So
that,
I'm
but
from
where at?
Yeah, I'm from Imo State.
Oh, emo
Imo
State.
State.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okoro, let me just add one bit. So cyber, and I endorse everything Dr. Dawson and Dr. Ron has said. But there's a thing also called cyberpreneurship. You may have a solution, you may have a skill set, but you have to make it count. You have to have the right strategy. I'll give you a bit of an example. When we started out in forensics here, it used to be a law enforcement thing. And so it took a while for you to be able to convince, people that and companies that private people can do it and can do it legitimately, can do it ethically, and can do it professionally. So it's all about strategy. I know that yes, government has to provide the framework, have to provide incentives for investments, have to do all of those things. But as a cyberpreneur, you also have to strategize, and there are lots of things you can do. Nigeria has over 30 million population estimated today. And if you look at the number of small businesses all not protected, small and medium scale enterprises, there are lots of the regulatory landscape also is changing, which means that there are new opportunities in data protection, new opportunities if it's a financial service sector, helping them to be in alignment with the CBN framework. There are lots of things you can do, but you have to be strategic about it. You have to show that you have the right value. The thing with cybersecurity is they might ignore you, but the day they get hit, they will remember you. So, but if you don't get out there, first of all, to make yourself visible, to make yourself like in football, they'll say the goalkeeper has to make himself very big. So, as an entrepreneur, you have to make yourself very big, such that when that disaster day comes, the first thing they're going to see or remember is you. Thank you. I think, Kristen, I think that Derek's hand is up.
Yeah,
Maybe.
Sixtus is also still there. Did you want to ask? No, Sixtus is normally there. Okay, so let's say Derek. Derek, do you want to ask your question? And then Shola. Shola, did you want to ask a question as well? Yes. Okay, I think Shola was second and then Derek third. So maybe we'll ask both of them and then we'll give the floor for the answers. So maybe Shola, ask your question first and Derek then follow that. We can't hear you, so let me see. You need to.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, my question goes to Dr. Sibe because we are both in Nigeria. Yeah, first thing is because of the security challenges we are facing as a nation, how do you intend or what's your recommendation for Nigeria? Because we have so many critical things that are playing out, and thus it's as if those these criminals are exploiting the advantages over the disadvantages, and the government seems to be dormant about it. Then there's secondly the advantage of cybersecurity. Why is it that the criminals, I mean the bandits, the terrorists, are now using it, the cybersecurity framework, as a means of financing their illegal activity? How? Then another one is how, like all these boys that, like in Nigeria, we call them the Yahoo boys, they train as a cybersecurity expert, but in the long run, they use it to the detriment of the populace. My question goes to you. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. And maybe Derek, you can ask your question now as well before we give back the floor.
All right. Thank you very much. It's been an amazing experience so far. Yeah. So my question, I don't know who's going to take it, but definitely Dr. Robinson, because I think the ecosystem is basically what he understands best. That's the African ecosystem. Not in Nigeria, by the way. I'm in Cameroon, and we say what affects cocoa affects coffee. Definitely gonna affect us too. So a few days ago, one of my friends got robbed, and we went to the police station. And while we got there, like 4 days later, these guys had to come to collect fingerprint from the house because there were a lot of fingerprints everywhere to actually match with the guard to see if it works. And if it ties, then they will know he's the one. So we're ready to go down to the house. Then the guy said, when was the robbery? We said like 4 days or 5 days ago. The guy's like, no, I think the sweat on the fingerprint has dried up. There's nothing we can do. I was like, bro, there's something you can do. So now I'm not in a position where I can actually say there is something you can do. I know there's always something that can be done. There are prints, there are a lot of things, evidence that can be gathered at the crime scene. Now, a lot happens, and we always find people that don't really have the competence at some very key positions. Now, how do you manage to bring in your own expertise when you actually know these guys won't really listen to you? Like in the case of my friend that got robbed, how do you make them understand that something can still be done? There are some products that can be still be applied, and the fingerprints can be matched with the person that is in custody. So thank you very much. I really need that.
Thank you, thank you. And I see Sixtus has raised his hands once more, so maybe I'll ask him if he wanted to ask one more question, and then we'll go back to all the panelists.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm interested in the area of education because you mentioned it earlier when it comes to national cybersecurity education. I've been recently trying to seek out for cybersecurity master's studies, and it's really, really not so easy. So I don't know, is there a solution to that? Because majority of the universities out there, they're quite expensive for an average African or, for in my instance, average Nigerian who is still in an underdeveloped country struggling to afford it. So how can experts in the industry or major world cybersecurity council like ISC2 and other councils dive into it to help to mediate the cost of cybersecurity education for underprivileged and underdeveloped countries? Thank you.
Great, thank you so
Say,
much.
Dr. Sever, let me go first because it's a couple of initiatives that I'm doing, especially to the young man from Cameroon. I have ran over the last 3 years with the University of Boya and also the Keldon University Institute down in Yaoundé, cybersecurity or cyber training of the basics. Now, their problem has been is that once they graduate, they can't find anybody that will listen to them to employ them, but they're very good at what they do. So it's got to start from the government that they got to say, okay, here's what we have to do. And then private industry will follow that if the mandate is strong enough. So I want to say that, yes, University of Boya and Keldon University Institute, both of them, I have given maybe about 40 of their students over the last couple of years some basic cybersecurity education at the invitation of the institution. Okay, thank you.
Great. Maurice? No, you're mute.
Apologies. For the Cameroonian who spoke, I'm affiliated with ICT University in Yaoundé. And so it's essentially a university that has students from Cameroon and Nigeria. My PhD student is actually he's Nigerian. And so I'm working with him on various things in terms of like what he's trying to do in terms of getting his doctorate. But, if you're trying to get individuals, okay, there's different things. Like when you're thinking about like governance, or business management, it's all about governance, right? So if you suffer from an attack and like, hey, this needs to get done or this could be done, it's all about governance and putting people in place that actually have real solutions. The problem is with some countries, not just African countries, there's places in the Americas and Europe that there's poor governance. So things occur and you're like, I have a solution, but no one listens. That's all about governance. That's not something that you can, I guess, fix yourself unless you actually get up in a government role yourself and start executing change. It can go from it can swing from one side to the other rather overnight. The other individual talked about Yahoo Boys. So in terms of cybersecurity, so what's interesting, in Nigeria you have Yahoo Boys, in Ghana you have Sakwa Boys, pretty much the same, right? Just hand in hand, just different names. Yahoo boys are more well known. Nigeria has a larger population. Everyone knows the penal code 419. With that is, I will say this. So Nigeria is sort of a special case. And it's a case where you have a large population, you have a middle class that is constantly being smaller and smaller while the rich get richer and the poor get poor. And so when individuals, they learn skills and they get a job and they're paid only so much naira a month to survive, it's easier to look towards criminal activity. You look at Romania. Romania has something very similar. Romania has a sharp, really not any sharp, smart population, and they're into cybercrime for other entities because they have these skills. It's just the actual salaries don't match up to what the skills are. So you're put in a predicament. You're like, you know what? I want to make money. I'm going to do what I need to do. That is like the start of the Yahoo boys, and no one's getting caught. And then plus, there with the 419 code, there's not many people that are actually going to jail long term. They may go to jail and get released not even a year later. And so that becomes the issue as well in terms of people who are actually getting punished for this. Right? You think about the individual who got cut over in Dubai. His big thing was he got extradited to the United States. So he actually suffered, right? But if you're in Nigeria or many other African countries, sometimes there's no extradition, right? And then there's also, like I said, there's no real penalty. And then the last item, we were talking about how you get this affordable education. At least from the United States, we have the Fulbright. There's Fulbright Scholar. You can get an individual on site for a year to actually be at the local university. And that individual can be a cybersecurity or forensic expert, and they can come there and give seminars, create courses and stuff like that. And hopefully that individual creates something that maybe there's a student exchange or something like that. And I've done that in Tunisia, Kosovo, Botswana, where I've received those actual Fulbright and whatnot, and done that collaboration long term. But that would be like the quickest thing that you could do.
Okay, thank you. Let me just address some of the questions since they were addressed to me. Shola mentioned the fact that the insecurity is being foiled also by the use of technology, and wondered why the authorities don't seem to be able to match up with that. Well, it's an international thing. The pace of crime most of the time outpaces crime outpaces even law enforcement, outpaces the justice system as well. But that's not an excuse in any way. The truth of the matter is that there is clearly a low cybersecurity readiness in terms of investigative capacity across from the crime scene to the courtroom. It requires a lot of delicate investigation, painstaking investigation in terms of evidence collection, in terms of evidence preservation, in terms of analysis, in terms of examination, and in terms of even assisting the judge, assisting your lawyer, or assisting the case in the question, because it's a case you're trying to assist, not any human. So it's a painstaking process, and also it's an expensive process. So if we want to look at why is this happening, I'd like to share the statistics. In the United States of America, there are over 411 laboratories, public-funded laboratories, forensic laboratories. Compare that to what we have in Nigeria. And I'm talking about public funded. Privately and publicly owned laboratories are over 11,000 in the US. In Nigeria, I don't want to mention any number, but your guess is as good as mine. So clearly it's a fundamental issue. But that's not to say that a lot is not being done. The personnel currently, they are putting in a lot of shift. But like the case of, again, let me use the analogy of a goalkeeper. The goalkeeper may make 100 saves and concede one and lose the game. So most of the time, people only remember that which he concedes and not the ones which he stopped. You also mentioned financing, how cybersecurity is playing a role particularly in the funding of terror and the funding of cyber banditry. Yeah, that's also one of the key challenges which is being faced using, emerging technologies. Crypto is more difficult to investigate than in the normal financial system. So criminals also leverage things like that. If you look at the case of the Colonial Pipeline in the US, the ransom was collected in crypto, even though it was later hunted down and collected by the FBI. But at least they did collect it. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge everywhere, which needs to be looked at. And then from the cybercrime point of view, I think Dr. Mo did give very good analogy around that. I did a study. Myself and Professor Connaught did a study which clearly pointed to the key drivers of cybercrime in Nigeria. They're socioeconomic in nature, joblessness, poverty, and all that. Another thing is the low entry barrier, which has been made possible by the crimeware as a service model. The fact that everybody can get on the dark web and get a dangerous tool and start wreaking havoc all over the place. So if you look at the number of people out of work and the fact that they have this skill set and the opportunity is not there for them in a streamlined manner, then you can understand why they do what they do. So that is a key challenge. Then Derek mentioned the incident and what a professional can do at times like that. Well, you can't do much other than being a cyber evangelist, as we continue to do. You continue to make a case. But the thing is, there are lots of things that could have been done in that situation, whether it be from the physical forensics or fingerprinting or even matching. But you need to understand what database are they comparing the fingerprints to. Do they have a DNA database, a national DNA database, a national harmonized national fingerprints database or biometric database? Again, these are questions that I'm sure if we properly investigate, you see that they don't even have. There are other things, even the digital trail. Criminals do go to steal with their phones, but unbeknownst to them, phones do handshake with the nearest base stations and all that. So yeah, they can triangulate those things and know it's not for certain, but it can be indicative or suggestive of the fact that somebody was at a scene of crime and allow you to prove alibi or refute one. So yeah, very interesting questions, and thanks once again.
Great. That's fantastic. I see one more hand up. Did you want to ask another question, or is that an old hand?
I do have another question, please. Regarding the AI bubble and the AI hype, there seems to be very little done regarding AI governance, especially. But I was speaking with someone the other day asking why is there no international organization governing AI research, how AI companies are rolling out new products without properly testing it. You see a lot of products creating more vulnerabilities, creating more weak spots, creating a whole lot of problems. There is little or nothing done about AI governance, both in regulation and the institutions governing AI. So I wanted you guys to say something about it more regarding AI governance, how the cybersecurity industry, because it still relates to national security, and a whole lot of our infrastructure are now being manned by AI, and both on the defense and the offense sector. So I just want you guys to say something about it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see Maurice. I think you want to answer the question.
Yes. I just completed a number of research last year relating to this. So this is interesting, right? So right now, the only comprehensive AI law is the EU Artificial Intelligence Act, which was signed last year. That's the only thing that's comprehensive right now. In the United States, think of the country as 50. Think of the United States as 50 countries, but we're states, right? So every state here has unique laws. And with what's going on, our current president has said that he wants to not restrict the use of AI, at least for 5 years. So that creates a problem because now, as we go into further elections, individuals can create deep fakes and other things that can really sway individuals to vote one way or another. And then you have to think about that AI and cybersecurity, they're separate, right? Like in the United States, we treat them as closely related because of funding, right? So for the CAEs, we were given the mandate to say, hey, we are going to look at cybersecurity and AI together because there's a lack of funding to really push AI education in terms of accrediting your body of knowledge. And so when you look at that, everybody is trying to implement things that may not go with one particular group or nation. So, like in Germany, right, the use of AI can't be used on certain days, such as Sunday, because if people can't work, you cannot use AI to run on days that actual people are not supposed to be working. And so that's a law. However, in other countries, there's nothing like that. There's no restrictions. And what Dr. Sipe said is great, because when you think about these technologies in the rollout, the laws are usually behind these technologies, right? There's something that happens, some type of crime, criminal act that happens. Well, there's no law even preventing it. That law could take several years to actually catch up with the technology, and by then the technology has leapfrogged. There's a number of countries that are tracking it better, but in terms of governance, how can you govern something if you lack the basic governance in your country, whatever country it may be, in general, right? You can't govern a technology or something that is very new if you lack the basic governance already. And so that is a fundamental issue and concern.
One quick thing, I placed in the chat, there's an initiative by NIST called the AI Risk
Yeah, I will do
Management
it.
Framework.
I'll do it, okay? Give me 1 second.
Hello?
Let me finish.
Casey, can you, okay. There's the AI Risk Management Framework. I know some countries are looking at that framework for adoption. They're really, really trying to get their arms around it. But you have to understand, AI is a very fast moving program. What's here today is going to change within 2 months. So the thing is that the framework basically says, how does an entity or an organization should look at AI from a risk management standpoint? I think it's something that everyone on this call, and I put it in the chat, you just click on it and you can see it. There's a whole practice area on AI risk management. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just to add to that, just as Dr. Mo said, yeah, the EU AI Act is the only established one, which a lot of countries are actually looking at it. But beyond that, from a point of good practice, and also to encourage people who have interest in that, because we need to know that it's an emerging area and countries are being careful not to asphyxiate the growth of AI. A lot of countries have been very careful in doing that. But there are other things, other frameworks or other standards that, for good practice sake, you can look at the NIST AI risk management framework, the IEC 42001, the OECD AI principles, even in Nigeria, to guide AI, growth. There is also the National AI Strategy, which the current Ministry of Communication also midwifed recently. So all of these are efforts. It's still inchoate, but it's a good question. But nations are being very careful not to asphyxiate growth. Thank you.
Wonderful. Is there a last question, perhaps? Very last question or last comment? Seems everyone is happy. Is that correct?
Please excuse me. I remember there was a question I asked that has not been answered regarding cybersecurity education. What cybersecurity companies and big governing bodies are doing to help subsidize the cost of cybersecurity education for underdeveloped countries, young people that are still trying to, get the required skills and knowledge. I give my example. I'm still trying to pursue a cybersecurity masters, and it's really expensive trying to. Many of them are not really funded. They are partly funded, and it's still one I was talking to today was telling me about $4,000. $4,000 may be a very huge subsidy, but for an average Nigerian living here, that's a very big, close to 6 million naira. So considering such an expense for a young Nigerian that's still in his 20s, still struggling, he can't really afford that. So I was looking at how companies, international agencies like ISC2 and other world governing bodies like IEEE and other governing bodies, is there any kind of program they have to support cybersecurity education? Thank you.
Let me jump on that. The truth is that it's expensive across board, and that's also because of the rush. People, they're not in need of customers, if I should put it in that way. But there are programs out there, they do reach out. If you check, I know you're aware of Certified in Cybersecurity, that for a long while now, it's been free. I think they wanted to give it out to over 1 million persons, and that's from ISC Square. There are also other organizations that do release some of these things. But the thing is that sometimes we tend to neglect the lower or lesser known certifications, and we are perhaps interested in CISSP or any of the big ones out there. But I think you should look out, always be on the lookout, and LinkedIn can do a very good job for you in that regard. Be on the lookout. You'll see a lot of free certifications, and organizations do release these things from time to time, so be on the lookout for that. And from a national point of view, that's why we're also advocating there should be other certification pipelines, particularly tailored to address the unique situation of the country. Like now you're in Nigeria. If we have a national certification standard that can be made cheaper, because it can be something, since it's in country, that can be lowered in terms of cost implication, and it's something that could potentially accelerate growth and engender more growth and more interest in the field.
Really quick, I put into the chat a no-cost training from the National Institute of Standards and Technology on risk management framework. It's a 4-module course that is no cost. You will get a certificate for the course, and also you'll be able to download the slides that the course is being conducted. So this is one way that I tell students to take this course, no cost, and you can get the foundational knowledge about cybersecurity as an introduction. So I would highly recommend that everyone hit the link, get it, and take the courses.
And I would like to say that, when you think about universities, many universities, especially in the United States, they cost. They cost a lot even for Americans. So for us to say, hey, we're going to offer this much lower tuition, it's very difficult. My university has an online program through Coursera. It's still $15,000, I believe. So that's still a cost. That's 15,000 US dollars. I don't know how many million Naira that is, but it's not cheap. However, if you're looking within your continent, you can look at University of Tunis, Tunis Business School. They actually have programs in English. It's all English. So if you can get from Nigeria to Tunisia, it's right there. They have really good rates for international students. You don't have to learn French or Arabic. Even getting around is rather easy, but you can go there. And then if you want to be in an English-speaking country, Botswana has the Botswana International University of Science and Technology. I was there as well. They have a really great program. It's very inexpensive, at least from U.S. standards, so maybe 2,000, maybe a little more, but that includes housing and stuff like that. But if you can get to a doctoral level, like my university will provide funding for some limited PhD students, right? So we're providing funding for PhD students. However, at the master's and undergraduate level, it doesn't exist. And that's why I mentioned earlier, like, if you could work with an institution and get a Fulbright scholar, at least there for a year, they can help develop a relationship or some programs that may benefit you, well, the region, that particular region. I think you say you're in Imo State. So it can help do that benefit. So that's something you can do. But ISC Squared, Certified Cybersecurity, there are limited certifications. However, a lot of times you can apply for certification and say, hey, you are from a developing country, and they'll offer a discount. But in terms of free, that just may not happen. But there are a lot of like videos on YouTube. You can go to Coursera, do things. But if you want certificates, proof of the actual training, you will have to pay at least some nominal fee. I think it's like $49. So you'll just have to be very creative in taking advantage of the opportunities that are nearby to you.
Great. I think we've had a great discussion. I thank all the speakers. I thank the audience for the wonderful questions. I thank everyone for the lively discussion that we have. And of course, I thank Tombari for setting this all up. It's been a fantastic event. Thank you so much, everyone. I really enjoyed it. And I look forward to future conversations and future discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.